Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session, or maybe the reason that you're here is because you really didn't want to get up from the last session. But for whatever reason, welcome. My name's Oliver Lewis, and I'm a human rights lawyer and direct an NGO based in Budapest called the Mental Disability Advocacy Centre. And our organisation uses law to secure inclusion, equality and justice for people with mental health issues and intellectual disabilities worldwide. We do some human rights monitoring, strategic litigation and advocacy. And I'm really pleased that we've just been commended in the Global Access to Justice Award by Clifford Chance. So we've just been awarded 500 Clifford Chancerian hours over the next year. So we're really chuffed about that. I'd like to thank Allen and Overy's for sponsoring this panel. So thank you very much. Please feel free to tweet during the session. It's live streamed and recorded, so nothing's off record. The panelists are very aware of that. The aim of this panel is to share good practice about how law firms can do high-impact work for NGOs. So it's relevant, I hope, equally for law firms and for NGOs in the audience. And we together developed 4 questions which we're going to debate and ask you to participate in. And those questions are: why is it that law firms do pro bono? What can law firms and barristers do for NGOs? What makes an ideal pro bono partnership between a law firm and an NGO? And how should NGOs choose which firms to approach for pro bono? And I've asked the panelists, who I'll introduce now, to not give big speeches or lectures, but to speak almost in bullet points so that we allow plenty of time for audience engagement and participation. You have everyone's bios in your packs, but just very briefly, Peter Norlander, closest to me, is CEO of Media Legal Defense Initiative and a global expert in the interface between media, law and human rights, and has vast experience of advocating and litigating before global and regional courts and bodies. Helen Rogers, next to Peter, is a solicitor and pro bono manager for Allen and Overy, based in London. And thank you so much, Helen, for stepping in at the last moment, because the person in the programme, colleague in Brussels, couldn't make it because she had to be in court. So thank you for joining us. Next to Helen is David Hawkins from Northern Ireland, and he's the project manager and solicitor at an organisation called PILS, which stands for Public Interest Litigation Support Project. And they provide financial and other legal support for public interest litigation and coordinate NGOs and lawyers in pursuit of that. Next to David is Sylwia Gregorczyk-Abram. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, probably not, who's a Polish advocate and senior associate at Clifford Chance's office in Warsaw. She works in the litigation and dispute resolution department and coordinates the Warsaw office's pro bono efforts. And last but not least, Claire Furel, who is the pro bono manager for Ashurst, and she's responsible for Europe and the Middle East. Claire already has 1 master's degree in law and is pursuing a 2nd master's degree in development studies, which is her particular interest. So I'd like you to welcome the panel. All right, so we heard this morning that someone said that people don't do pro bono that people do pro bono because they're altruistic. Do you agree with that? So I'm going to ask law firm colleagues to answer that first. Helen, what's your view on why law firms do pro bono?
Well, I actually agree that there is a lot of altruism that goes into why a volunteer would take on a pro bono project. I think it's naive to say that there isn't a business case behind it as well for a lot of big law firms. But that's not a negative concept in my view. I believe that by facilitating lawyers to actually fulfill this altruistic nature, or to really feel they're making a difference in a different area of work, it is a good thing, and it actually helps to professionalise the pro bono work that is done on behalf of NGOs.
Thank you. Claire, what's your opinion?
I think in addition to what Helen has just said, I think that there might be a cultural reason. So, for example, in Anglo-Saxon countries or Anglo-Saxon law firms, the US, Australia, the UK, there might be a stronger pro bono culture, whereas and that will maybe be because of the particular type of social contract that you have in a country versus, for example, the one that exists in continental Europe. I also think that pro bono is carried out because of a sort of trend in CSR, where law firms are increasingly conceptualizing what values they wish to hold as a brand, and they see giving access to justice and lifting the monopoly on legal services as being the most valuable skill that they can actually share.
Thank you. What about you? People who work in law firms, what's your opinion? I don't know if we have roving mics in here. Oh, we do. Hi. We have one roving mic. Oh, two. In fact, called 1 and 3, but there's 2. Yes, Tom Dunn from Clifford Chance.
Yes, I'm Tom Dunn, Pro Bono Director at Clifford Chance. I've just got a question. Why does it matter what the reasons are for people doing pro bono work?
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Behind you.
I remember Teresa from Portugal. I remember one of my institutions says, I don't really care why they help as long as they help well.
All right, so we've got 2 lawyers there dodging the question. What about NGOs? Peter, do you care?
Yeah, well, actually, part of my answer was going to be, so long as the work gets done, that's really great. But we do find in our practice that when people are truly motivated, they'll put in more work. They'll work harder, and they'll do it again and again. And that's actually really important to us, because the kind of requests that we farm out are almost always last minute, and they're always tricky. And that's not because we sit on them for 2 months before filing. It's because a journalist comes to us at the very last minute saying, I'm going to be in court tomorrow, I need help. Or, lawyers coming to us saying, I'm defending a journalist, I'm actually not a libel law specialist, could you help me revise the arguments? And we've got partnerships at the moment in Singapore, for example, where we're matching up senior media lawyers from here to Singaporean lawyers who are extremely brave, but not necessarily media law experts, and who've actually done this type of work for us, and who are willing to do that on a Sunday evening. And that you can only do when the person doing the pro bono work is really motivated. So that definitely makes a difference.
Sylvia, does motivation matter?
Well, it does matter, but I want to really believe that law firms do pro bono because they really understand the concept of it, and they really want to be change makers and give back to the community, and to make a positive impact. But we can't pretend that there also are business reasons for doing that it's so fashionable now, or our clients expect us to do that. But I do believe that if law firms does that only because of those business reasons, it will not be effective and it will not last long. And answering to the question, why does it matter? Because, for example, if I have a junior lawyer or senior lawyer that does pro bono work only because it looks good on the appraisal, on his term sheet, but this work is nicely done, it's on time, he's effective or she is effective, I don't really care whether he really understands the concept or he really is devoted to the idea of the NGO.
Thank you. David, you're a pro bono matchmaker in Northern Ireland, so what's your more empirical experience?
In relation to the PILS project, what we have is what's called a pro bono register, which is a database of solicitors and barristers who have told us by signing up to the register that they are content to do pieces of pro bono work for us. Whenever they do sign up, we know what areas of law they are engaged in, and we know how they want to be engaged with ourselves. So, for example, a barrister may turn around and say, well, I'm not interested in delivering training, but I am interested in running cases, in providing legal opinions. That allows us, whenever we have the needs of the NGO, we can then match it in a very tailored fashion to the skills and the expertise of the practitioners on our pro bono register.
Great, thank you. So, NGO types in the room, I'm assuming that there are some. I know that there are some, in fact. What's your view? Does it matter why law firm lawyers do pro bono, or are you just grateful to receive whatever you can? Elsa in the front row, and then gentleman over there, and then gentleman there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would say from an NGO perspective, it matters if you are trying to get some legal aid or legal work done pro bono, and you can sometimes find that the big law firms only want to do it if it's kind of sexy or groundbreaking. If it's bread and butter stuff, what's in it for them? You know, it's almost as though they think, well, you should be paying for that. Yeah. Whereas, and I'm sorry if those heard me make this point this morning, sometimes the best you can do to support an NGO is to fill those gaps where they don't have in-house expertise, the bread and butter work.
Great, we're going to pick up on those points in the next question, actually, which is what law firms can do for charity, so thank you. So gentlemen, a few rows up, if you raise your hand and speak into the mic, please.
Good afternoon. Garth Menkes, the International Senior Lawyers Project. We have a database of several thousand lawyers who've signed up, who want to do projects, and we have a hard time finding enough projects for all of the lawyers who'd like to do it. So there's plenty of altruism in our database. But I do think that lawyers sometimes do it because it's a way of getting experience on projects that they might not otherwise get from paying clients. And that's not a bad reason for them to broaden their expertise. But I will say that in our experience, we have found that sometimes pro bono lawyers do more for their clients than might a paying lawyer. Because there is this idea that this is being done pro bono. This is being done for the public good, for the public interest. And so they feel a responsibility to make sure that the social impact, the environmental impact, the human rights aspects of a project are also raised with the client. So there tends to be a more holistic view sometimes with pro bono lawyers who feel that their client is this client in front of them, but also the public at large.
Thank you.
I'm Anton Burkov, NGO Sutyazhnik from Russia. I completely agree with the previous speaker. Actually, we have 10 years of experience working with using pro bono services. And the reason we love this help is because we get very high-level experience, legal experience. And also, if we are able to sell to a law firm our case that we're asking to help us with, we also multiply effect of this legal experience of high-level lawyers, multiplied by the incentives for the lawyer to work on it. So each time we apply to ISLP for a help to find a law firm, we want to make sure that we write the story in of the case in the right way.
And so, sorry to interrupt, are you saying that the lawyers do it because they can see the multiplier effect?
No, we want that the lawyers from the law firms understand the importance of the case we're handling, to make sure that they work as hard as possible on our case.
So the question is, why do lawyers do pro bono? And you're suggesting that actually they can see the importance, your role, to communicate the potential importance or potential transformative effect.
The potential effect to reform the law or reform the legal practice.
Thank you, thank you. A couple of other points, maybe from up there in the gods. Yes, over there. Thank you.
My name is Tatiana Zadiraka, and I also represent the Russian Federation. I would say as long as United Way has been involved in pro bono trainings for the NGO for the last 7 years, and we are successfully working with the majority of international law firms in Russia, I would say that the situation with the law firms, pro bono lawyers, they understand the mission and the core activity of NGO, they provide pro bono services, the better relations are. And not only about the particular case, but ideally, in general, and sustainable relationship might be evaluated and developed. And in this connection, in this situation, the law firms keep producing more and more pro bono services.
So but the question is, why do they do that? Why do they
I
do
have
that? Not
several.
how yet.
I have two ideas. Idea number one, because it's a culture of the pro bono legal firms came to Russian Federation. Now this is the right of Russian firms to do the same. And the second, that the people would like to share the experience, understanding quite well that in majority of cases, Russian NGOs don't have lawyers as the staff members, and they can't afford themselves to have pro bono consultation from the big firms and paying for that.
Great, thank you, spasibo большое. But so you're echoing essentially something which Claire pointed out, which is a cultural difference, and perhaps in some countries where there's less pro bono, it's an opportunity for the managers of the law firm to actually get lawyers engaged, and also a personal, more altruistic reason. So last comment on this section, then we're moving on by the lady straight in front of me.
I fully agree with what everybody else said. By the way, I'm Agnieszka Wardak. I'm with the Dentons in the Warsaw office, and I also coordinate the pro bono practice in my office. So as I said, I fully agree with all the reasons mentioned. On the top of that, I would like to add two. One comes from my associates, who is a very frequent volunteer on various pro bono cases. And he told me once something that I really cherish. He said, and we mostly work with large corporations, so that's why his reason is so valid. He said, when I work for the corporations, this is sort of anonymized help. When I work on pro bono cases, I am dealing with a human being. I see his happiness, I see his real trouble, and related emotions. So that's the reason number one I wanted to add. The second reason is that coordinating the pro bono work in my office, I fully believe in altruism and other type of motivations of my associates. But just in case, I also introduced in our office a pro bono award, and it's a weekend in Paris, and it's given every year.
Just in case people are not altruistic, you can go to Paris. Fantastic, thank you very much. Second question which we want to address and get some answers to is, what can law firms do for charities in a pro bono way? So we'd like to attempt to structure this by splitting activities into two. One is what we're calling sort of mission-based activities, something which a law firm can do to advance that charity's mission. So in a substantive area of law or policy, so it could be legal research, regulatory stuff, litigation, and so on. And then secondly, maybe equally importantly, are things which a law firm can do to help the NGO function. So corporate advice for the NGO about, for example, leases, employment matters, NGO regulatory issues, governance structures, and so on. So we're going to take the first half and get panelists' suggestions on that, and we're going to start with David.
As I previously said, the main way in which PILS operates through pro bono is through this matching. And really a lot of the matching work and the work that is done by solicitors and barristers is probably very familiar to a lot of you. So, for example, a solicitor delivered training on a pro bono basis to one of our members who wanted more information on the legal powers of healthcare professionals whenever detaining people under the mental health order. They also, solicitors and barristers, have provided pre-legal advice at multi-party round tables where a number of different organisations are brought together on a common theme. They have also provided legal opinions on the prospects of success in potential cases and have ran cases themselves. In the last couple of years, larger firms have come into Northern Ireland really for the first time, and that is actually even affecting our own understanding of how pro bono can be provided by the legal sector. In the summer, we had an excellent meeting with a law firm that operates across the whole island of Ireland called A&L Goodbody, who stated their willingness to provide pro bono services in a number of different ways. And one of the most interesting was even providing admin support in order to prepare bundles and trial bundles for the purposes of court hearings. There are only 3 members of staff at the PILS project, so to prepare case papers can be an extremely intensive exercise. So to have that sort of support available to us is extremely important. So even in the last couple of years, our own understanding of pro bono is changing.
Thank you. Peter, the other NGO person on the panel, what is it that your NGO does, and how do you use pro bono to advance the mission of your charity?
Our mission is to provide legal defense. So, I mean, we are about litigation. Journalists get sued for defamation for things that they've written, and this is in countries around the world. We do most of that in Africa, Asia, Central Eastern Europe, Russia. So we churn through probably 300-400 cases a year together with our partners, and pro bono assistance in that can be completely transformative. We had a good example where we represent a journalist from Burkina Faso before the African Court of Human Rights. The journalist spent a year in prison for alleging that a prosecutor had been corrupt. And this, we were able to take, we lost this in Burkina Faso because the courts couldn't get any justice there. And we were able to take this to the African court only because we had an exceptionally strong pro bono partner, Wilma Hale, who prepared the bundles for us. As David said, that's very menial, but extremely important because we can't do that. They made sure that everything got to Arusha in time, which is where the African Court of Human Rights is. They seconded a partner to us to argue parts of the case, and it's that kind of, beginning to end assistance which was necessary for us to do that. And it's transformative not just for the case, but in a wider context, because it is the first free speech case before the African Court of Human Rights. It's transformative in that sense, which is, of course, also why it was attractive to the law firm to do that. But I want to give one other example, if I may. And that's just to mention that we consume litigation in that sense, and litigation services. But monitoring and supervising that on our side requires capacity. Like, David only has 3 members of staff. We're also a very small organization. And even when we get a lot of pro bono assistance, that requires a lot of resources on our part to make sure that goes well. And so what we're looking for in addition to litigation are things like secondments, but even financial donations. If you give us a couple of hundred of hours of pro bono support, we need to manage that. We need to manage that well to make sure that it delivers the end result at the law firm. And managing that costs money.
Thank you. Can anyone in the audience from the NGO field speak to that last point, which is how it is possible to manage pro bono relationships? Colleagues from Transgender Europe, I think.
Just saying yes.
Yes, okay. So, all right. So yes, it requires resources. Anyone would like to speak directly to that point? We'll take it that every NGO person in the room agrees.
I wasn't sort of pitching for donations right here. Really? I was just making the point
yes, you
that
were. No, you weren't. Right. So, law firm colleagues, could you give an example of something you or your law firm has done for a charity client in terms of advancing their mission? Claire, would you like to go first?
So Ashurst recently worked with a social finance intermediary called Investing for Good and the Cabinet Office's social finance team. And this was to develop a new type of fund, which is called commingling fund, and essentially you take philanthropic foundation capital and you place it in the fund, and then you seek to attract further commercial capital, which is then commingled into this single fund. And then it is intended that the fund is then invested in charities and social enterprises that have are seeking to achieve a social outcome, and then you'll also achieve a financial return. So the template documents were made available by the Cabinet Office, and this is with the aim of trying to develop the UK as a hub for social finance in the world. And so it was an important project, an innovative project in the sense that it really broke down barriers relating to tax and funds law. And then just a second example, if I may, a work that we do with a legal action charity. We have 2 lawyers that are permanently assigned to a caseworker, and they have been for the last year. This caseworker has a particular expertise in Indonesian law relating to the death penalty. And this has really been a pilot project at Ashurst to have people permanently assigned to a caseworker so that they can actually get to know the business of the client and get to know the different cases that that caseworker is working on. And they're copied in on all emails, they attend meetings, and they really sort of act as a sort of contact point within Ashurst to then delegate work within Ashurst.
Sylvia, what has Clifford Chance in Poland done?
Well, I just want to make a short comment as an introduction that you probably know that working as a lawyer in a big firm doesn't really look like it is shown, in the TV series. I don't know, I Make Bill Suits or whatever. Not only because half of my colleagues are even not that handsome as Harvey Specter, but because it's what we do mostly is we do a lot of research. We spend a lot of time on the phone. We do analyze. We really mostly do the desktop job. So it is not always a very interesting job to do, but the outcome of this may be really big and very interesting. And what we did, and this is actually that was the outcome of the last business session that took place in Warsaw. We cooperated with the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, and we realized that we can help them to prepare the legal submission to the national and international courts regarding human rights. So we did prepare 2 communications to the Committee of Ministers of Councils of Europe regarding the interpretation of the European Court of Human Rights judgments. And one of them concerned infringement of the right to the peaceful enjoyment of possession. And second of them was about deprivation of access to the antenatal test, as well as the information on the health of the fetus. So we spent many hours of researching it and writing a huge submission. So it was a very fascinating job, but yet the outcome is huge.
Thank you. So that's a very different example from Claire's. So let's get on a plane and travel due south to Montenegro.
So again, this was a PILNet referred project to ANO on behalf of MANS, which is an anti-corruption and anti-money laundering organisation based in Montenegro. And they had quite a reputation in Montenegro for being political activists, really. And they did struggle to have a legitimate voice with government, with financiers, and other professional bodies. And what they asked us to do originally was to do a comparative research project, essentially, looking at anti-money laundering legislation in 5 different jurisdictions, and then to compare that with the laws that have been quite recently drafted in Montenegro. And so we duly did that. And actually what we found was that on paper the law was in pretty good shape. But really the problem was in practice, that the corruption and money laundering problems that were going on the ground were with a real difficulty. So in terms of what we could do as a firm, we actually leveraged the partnerships that we have with our corporate clients and brought one of our major banking clients on board to actually go to Montenegro and deliver seminars with MANS to a group of, a very diverse group actually of MPs, financiers, all the people that they were trying to reach but had struggled to before. And it was a great outcome. I mean, the room was alive with questions. There was dialogue between different groups that there hadn't been before that. And such that the EU delegation to Montenegro saw the work as an important milestone for Montenegro in their application for accession to the EU. So I suppose the lesson from it for us was that it's quite rare to find very interesting, substantive pro bono work for regulatory lawyers. Often it's the big strategic litigation that grabs the headlines and that everyone wants to talk about. But really, this was a way for regulatory lawyers to influence policy in quite a meaningful way in Montenegro.
Thank you very much. And that's in an office where where ANO actually doesn't have.
Right.
It's in a country where you don't have an office.
That's right.
So it's pretty interesting that you managed to lever your professional clients' resources to help a local NGO in Montenegro. Fascinating. Good. So we've got 5 really incredible examples of what law firms have been able to do in partnership with charities. But what about the other side of the coin in helping NGOs to function? So the stuff around helping with leases or employment contracts. Is there any experience in the room which you'd like to share about you as a law firm helping a charity to establish and function? Or from the other side, if you work in an NGO, do you outsource your legal advice and all of that to pro bono law firms? Any tips to share? Madam, one. If you put your hands up, if you want to speak.
I'm Marcia Levy, and oh, that's so loud. So starting on Monday, actually, I will be the executive director of an organization called Pro Bono Partnership. It's based in Westchester, New York, and what it does is it partners with nonprofits on all of their transactional work, only transactional, not litigation, and does it by partnering with in-house counsel as well as law firm corporate lawyers to provide the legal work on all the issues that you're talking about. I've worked with the organization in the past because I was pro bono counsel at a big law firm, and I always tell the story, the first day I got to work at the law firm, having been a litigator all my life as a lawyer, one of the partners turned to me, and when I said, "What should we focus on?" he looked at me very meaningfully and said, "Transactional pro bono." And I had to go back to my office, call a friend at another big law firm and say, "What's a transaction?" So I got the answer, I learned what it was, and then developed relationships with NGOs to get out corporate lawyers to be able to use their great skill to help them. And I think it's a wonderful model and really critical to the success of those organizations being able to help the clients they need to help by not having to spend their good resources on lawyers.
Congratulations on the new job. And that's a good point, right? Why should any charity pay a law firm to write employment contracts or to modify the statute of association or whatever it is? I mean, obviously, thousands and thousands of charities do pay corporate lawyers to do that. They're obviously not sitting in this room. Madam?
Hello, I'm from Germany, and I was working in a foundation as a grant maker before I started a clearinghouse in Germany now. And there we work together with law firms for our grantees that they get all the administrational work done. And I would say at least 70-80% of them would not have survived without this legal administrative work.
Thank you. And
Hi, Charlotte Dollard from A4ID. As I hope people in this room know, we run a brokerage service partnering with lots of international law firms and NGOs. My experience is that there's a huge appetite for this kind of transactional, operational work in law firms, but also a huge need from NGOs. And in fact, we've recently launched a new pilot initiative which is doing a legal health check for NGOs. So law firms partnering with an NGO, having a more sustained relationship with them than just discrete projects, and going through and making sure that operationally they are at their best so they can go out and do the things that they're set up to do.
And what do you think about law firms, there are quite large law firms in London, which have charity law departments which charge a fee for charities to do all the stuff we've been talking about? I mean, are you saying they should just evaporate because actually lawyers should do all of that stuff for free?
No, I mean, I think that, charity lawyers have a right to act on a commercial basis just as any other lawyer does. And I think that I mean, there was a big discussion in this room this morning about legal aid and pro bono, and you know how these services intersect and overlap sometimes. And I think that somebody raised the point this morning that these services need to be built into the funding of organisations. And so if you need charity law advice, that needs to be part of your funding. If you can get it pro bono, that's great, but that service still has value, even if it's a benefit in kind.
Yeah. First of all, Peter, what benefit in kind, what does your NGO do about that?
Yeah, we actually reflect that in our own accounts, and we don't just do that because it looks good. We do that because it really is a service that we otherwise would have to pay a lot of money for. And it's something that's actually very attractive to funders. I mean, large foundations, funders such as MacArthur or Open Society Foundations, and for them to see that we have the support, of highly professional lawyers, not only acts as a sort of a stamp of approval, as it were, but it also shows that we can bring other resources to the table, and that is valuable to the funders. Also, it multiplies.
It also demonstrates, I think, that you've thought through the project, because if you've managed to get a pro bono partner already agreed, and then going out to a donor, you've done quite a lot of project planning. Sylvia, did you want to come in on this
Yes,
point?
I just want to make a short comment, because maybe most of you speak on behalf of well-known NGOs, quite big NGOs, but here in Poland, I know many small, foundations or NGOs that are just, having amazing ideas, but they just don't have the tools or managerial skills how to, to do the business. So for me, from my perspective, if I will help them, as a partner or anyone, my firm that having those tools to help them to run the business, it's a huge value. So I guess for those smaller NGOs, not well known, this is a huge value.
Thank you. 2 concluding observations from the floor. First of all, who has the mic? Sorry, you have the mic, and then you.
Thank you. I'm Hubertine Bergsma from Stibbe. It's a full-service law firm based in Amsterdam. We do 2 types of pro bono work. We do strategic litigation, and we do legal sponsoring. So that's more the corporate pro bono work. And there's one big advantage of that, and that is that the pro bono work is divided over the whole law firm. Because what we really want to do when we do pro bono work is that we use our specialization in our pro bono work. So I'm in the field of administrative law, and of course that is typically a field of law that is involved in the strategic litigation. But people who are working in the corporate part of our firm, which is about half of the firm, normally are not involved in this kind of pro bono work. So especially the legal sponsoring is perfect for them to be involved in pro bono work and make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to add an observation from the field. We also work with smaller NGOs, and what we see is that they have struggled to behave as a client when they are together with the law firm, because they're just not used to that. And so they are always hesitant to ask in the same manner as a corporate client would do from the law firm to get the services. And what we found out is that it's helpful for them to pay at least a little bit, not get it completely for free or paying a matchmaking fee, because then they really have to think about, do we need this project, how do we want to work with it, what is the impact of this project, and to ask from the people associated to that, the pro bono givers, to do or to treat the pro bono project like a regular project.
I think you've opened up a can of worms, and I'm just going to explore that a bit deeper. But if you get the NGO to pay something, it then is not pro bono, right? You don't necessarily have to, well, I mean, yes, you can.
There's a difference between pro bono and what we call low bono.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's not pro bono, it's something else.
Yeah, what we see is that there's always also a right to exist for low bono, and what we see is when they pay a matchmaking fee, which goes to the third-party providers who ensures the quality of the project and who is there in case of struggles. This also changes the game.
Very interesting. Okay. I can see some aghast faces in the audience there. Sir, you would like to respond to this?
Not responding to that, actually taking us back a step. I'm from the Law Centres Network in England and Wales, and we have found transactional pro bono immensely helpful in the way we run our business. At various points when we are either changing or growing or adapting to, for example, legislative changes. I mean, after 2006, both company law and charity law changed in this country and required us to rewrite our constitution. We got transactional help through that, found that immensely helpful to compliance as well as to moving forward. Similarly with IP law, which is certainly not one of our strengths, being specialists in social welfare law. We rebranded and got a lot of very useful transactional pro bono help that helped us really not put a foot wrong, basically, in terms of getting it right first time and growing. So yeah, we can definitely attest to the efficacy of the transactional element.
Okay, thanks very much. We're going to take your point about efficacy now and establishing helpful partnerships between law firms and pro bono clients and ask ourselves the question, what makes an ideal pro bono partnership? So what we've done over the course of the last month, actually, with my fellow panelists, is swapped a few ideas on email and over the telephone about I asked them to give 3 tips that they would share with you, and then what we've tried to do together is kind of awkwardly somehow cluster them into 3 clusters, which we'll probably find out don't work at all, but we're going to give it a go. So what we'd like to suggest to you is that the first cluster is about finding out about the needs, the second cluster about law firms getting organized and involved, and thirdly, about professionalizing the relationship. You may vehemently disagree with the clustering, but we're going to see how it goes first. So in terms of finding out about the needs, Claire, you've worked with lots of different pro bono partners before. What do you mean about your needs to find out about what their needs are?
So I think from the beginning, establishing what the NGOs' objectives and timelines are. And I think from the perspective of the law firm, to be able to communicate what capacity it can actually give the NGO, whether it's going to be able to clear conflicts or not, because it needs to be able to factor in the pro bono assistance if it's going to be a really long-term, for example, piece of strategic litigation, factor that into its employees' schedules. So I think, as long as the timeline and the objectives are clearly set out within a terms of reference, and I think for the terms of reference to be as detailed as possible, and I think communication is key.
Okay, communication. David, what do you think about that?
Just really following on from that it is creating a good understanding between the NGO and the lawyer at the outset. For the NGO's part, it is important to be clear and precise with the nature and extent of the assistance that is being sought. And from the legal perspective, I think it's just as important to be clear and realistic about the resources that can be allocated to the NGO in order to deliver the service.
Thank you. David, you mentioned the phrase good understanding. From your perspective, Helen, what do you understand by good understanding?
Well, to follow on from that, David, really, it's I think any partnership is a relationship in the way that law firms have with their corporate clients. You cannot really have an ideal partnership without a proper relationship that kind of grows and develops over time. And I'd just like to refer to, it was actually a 2-year global charity partnership that we've just sort of finished. But in the debrief session, we heard very candidly from their chief exec that, when they heard that the partnership was about funding as well as, it was about fundraising as well as pro bono, they sort of silently rolled their eyes about the pro bono bit because, it's like, really that's going to be a bit of a thorn in our side. But actually, towards the end of it, they were evangelical about the kind of pro bono that they'd been getting because we'd really kind of got under the skin of the organisation and what they really wanted to achieve with their work. But the same from them, and actually it took us months. I mean, it's not a quick process. I think for an ideal pro bono partnership to happen, it takes time. And often you don't always have the luxury of that, but it's really to understand the business needs on both sides, I think.
Peter?
Yeah, we spoke a lot about this, in our prep, and it's like a marriage, it's like a relationship. There needs to be a lot of talking, there needs to be a lot of sort of massaging of egos, but there needs to be a really good understanding of limitations as well. So what the NGO, what do you really need? And can you actually absorb all the help that we're going to give you, right? I mean, that's an important question to ask at the outset. And for the NGO to ask the law firm, well, are you going to be able to deliver that? Does the partner, is this actually a field of expertise of this person, or is this just something that they find really interesting, but don't actually know that much about? So, you know what I mean? So there needs to be really good communication and a really good understanding. Yeah.
So second cluster, which moves on from that quite interestingly, is that law firms should be organised and get involved. Sylvia, what does that mean for you?
Well, I believe that a good organisation is the key. So I would suggest that as a law firm, you should have someone in the NGO as a contact person always, just to enable the proper cooperation with the law firm. We do that with our strategic clients a lot, but also what we do, we have a partner to lead the relationship. Because also when you have the partner that leads the regular review meetings, this partner can help you also enable, help both sides to better understand their needs and get the NGO better. Get to know NGO better and get to know what is it really about.
So you have a partner at Clifford Chance who's in charge of the issue, and you have a relationship partner, like marriage guidance person. If things go wrong, then either party can ask that person for advice. Is that right?
Well, we do have, for our strategic clients, we have a separate partner that actually take care of this particular relation. So. And even if the partner is based in Warsaw, he is informed by all the projects that are going on all over the other offices, and he participates in this course, and the flow of the information is there. So there's really an order, and it really works well.
David, what are your tips to NGOs sitting in the room about how they can get law firms engaged and involved?
I thought it was really interesting what Sylvia was saying whenever talking about how NGOs should treat the law firm as partners, and even how the lawyers would be interested in going to the likes of conferences or seminars being organised by the NGO in order to get to know them a bit better, which I thought was really, really interesting. I suppose following on from that, there is, I think there is a bit of an onus on the NGO to approach the relationship as a relationship of equals. To sometimes NGOs are maybe a little bit shy, a little bit coy or behind the door whenever going to an enormous legal operation and a big corporation. And this was something that actually came out in one of our own external evaluations when solicitors and barristers were asked about our project and about how they perceive us. And what was really brought home to us was that we need to always give the impression that we're not some little charitable NGO, but we are a very serious organisation delivering the gold standard on public interest litigation. And there is an onus on the NGO to bring themselves to the relationship with the lawyer in order to really build a meaningful and substantial relationship.
Good.
And actually, I think I'd say there's a strong onus on the recipient to do that, because also, you know, if you behave shoddily as an NGO, then the next time you're going to go out and ask for help, you're not going to get it. And that is actually, I mean, it also goes to professionalizing a relationship, but no, sorry, I'm not allowed to talk about it. That's our next topic, right?
You can segue into it.
Sorry, I can segue into it. Because so there was a lot of talk in our prep about how we as NGOs want to be treated as paying clients, essentially, right? Well, a paying client would actually also treat the provider of the service as a professional, and keep up the communication and be as professional to them as they are to us. And we're in a slightly awkward position sometimes where we're a middleman, so we get clients in places like Bangladesh or India who come to us for stuff, and we then translate that into a proper legal request and pass it on to a pro bono provider. And we on our side have tremendous difficulty from time to time chasing up these people in other parts of the world who we jump through hoops for them, and then our pro bono partners jump through hoops for them, and then they often just go off the radar. You don't hear from them for 4 or 5 months. You have to follow their Facebook or their Twitter streams to figure out what happened to the case, you know what I mean? And in that kind of scenario, that's really embarrassing to us. And we're then embarrassed to the pro bono lawyer who did the work, because they want to know what happened. We want to know what happened. We don't know. And it means that the pro bono lawyer who did all of that work on a Sunday evening, the next time round, we're not going to be able to come to them. So, it's really important on the recipient to be professional.
It's shocking to find out that some NGOs are disorganized. I just can't believe it.
Not in our places, right?
Not yours, obviously. Claire, what tips do you have about professionalizing the relationship?
So I think following on from that, so in terms of professionalizing, I think that I would, rather than be reactive, try and be proactive. So conceptualize at the beginning of a project, or even maybe at the beginning of a project cycle. So for example, lots of NGOs might apply for 3 years of funding, 5 years of funding, and to actually think strategically, sit down with the law firm and discuss potentially how the law firm could assist, and how you could factor that assistance into the whole project cycle. And that in turn would actually strengthen the application for funding. So at the moment it's very on trend to have partnerships with the private sector, and I think that would substantially increase chances of funding. And I think the second thing would be to consider having a panel of law firms. So for example, if a law firm is conflicted out of a project or doesn't have sufficient capacity, it's very common for commercial clients to have 2 or 3 law firms on a panel that they can turn to, and that would be another tip.
Thank you. Helen?
Just to further that, Claire, there is a fairly recent example of a major international NGO actually asking a group of law firms to pitch for their pro bono work, which actually is a very, very good idea. And I think, speaking from a law firm perspective, it certainly made us sit back and think, well, actually, if we were to take on this kind of work, what would the commitment be for us? Could we resource this across different offices? Is it the kind of work that fits within our own pro bono strategy? So for both sides, it really kind of gave the opportunity to step back and think what was really going to be required. So, yeah, in terms of really professionalising the request, that is certainly one way to do it. I mean, I'm not suggesting that every NGO could do that, but it certainly goes to the heart of professionalism anyway.
Thank you. Right, there must be a lot of experience in the room about relationships. There has been a ton of tips which we've kind of clustered in a very fluffy way for you. We intend to write this up. We'll force ourselves to cluster them appropriately. But do you have any reflections on the tips that you have heard about or would like to add to the list? So we've got someone up there. Got Elsa here.
I have 3 tips to add. Tips number 1: when we're talking about the institutionalization, the relationship with law firms, we need to keep in mind very serious moments. Now, moment number 1, the deadlines. It means with NGO is asking lawyers for assistance. The deadline soon, it means tomorrow. which is not obviously from the law standpoint that soon it means tomorrow. If we don't agree on deadlines, it creates the feeling of frustration from the NGO side, because I'm representing NGO side. Second, we never try as an organization and the NGOs we represented to send the request to the lawyers last moment. If the process is tomorrow, we try to find out the lawyers 6 months ahead of it. And it helps enormously. And the third one, I would like to come back to the notes made by Peter, that I'm very much astonished that we keep talking about whether or not the law firms perceive the NGO equally to the paid client, because it seems to me in the majority of cases it is already in the past. It used to be like this 7 years ago, but now when we are asking the law firms to find out asking for the pro bono advices, we are very efficiently and quickly find out the pro bono lawyers who are ready to accept our appeal. And the last but not least, it is reference somehow to the young lady from Germany who was talking previously. Very often the NGOs, not only the big one but small one, they speak what I call Chinese language. So for the lawyers, it's very often is not clear what the request from NGO is. And it means that some intermediate partners, and I think the PILNet might be one of these, can be the bridging in between the NGO sector and the lawyers, helping lawyers understand what the real requests from the NGOs are.
Thank you. Yeah, an important point about communication, I think, and some NGOs are so involved in the problematic of the substance which they're involved in that it's very difficult sometimes actually to even articulate the help or to begin to articulate the types of solution that one wants to see. So that is a good point, but it's something that arises in any conversation where people are talking across disciplines, whether that's social science or science or law or humanities, actually. So it goes back to the point that the panelists made, I think, about, look, just sitting down, communicating, trying to establish a shared vocabulary, deadlines, and so on. Thank you very much.
Just one comment.
Oh.
This is exactly the expertise that NGOs can leverage from company authorities, for example, because we are used to formulate the question exactly that the law firm can respond. So that's our primary task in companies, and NGO could really get an advantage from that in the communication. What company do you work at? John Deere.
Which company? GE?
John Deere.
John Deere.
Okay.
You know, the big tractors with the...
Tractors. I'm a city boy, I don't know the countryside. Yes, and that's why it's often very beneficial to have senior lawyers on your board of trustees, so that the NGO has a sort of in-house person who's able to frame the issues. But thank you for that point.
I don't want to stretch the analogy of marriage and relationships too far, but I was just thinking, I'm just about old enough to remember when it was considered rather forward for a woman to make the first approach. Do law firms think that it should always be NGOs that make the first approach, or do you ever think, in terms of your pro bono strategy, of going out and finding some NGOs that fit a particular theme?
Now with Guardian Soulmates and Tinder, the question is... Oh, sorry. Pro bono, yes. What do you think? Should law firms be more proactive in soliciting the requests, going out to the NGO sector and
Of course.
offering?
I do that. I do cooperate, for example, with Ashoka in Poland. They have a lot of Ashoka fellows in Poland, and during the last few months, I've met with most of them just to get to know them better and think about the ideas we can do together. So yes to your question, definitely.
Claire, do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I've approached NGOs in the past. If I'm trying to sort of build up a certain, we were talking about secondary specialism. If, for example, we're already doing some work, with an NGO, and there's one that's related, for example, I have gone and approached them.
To give an NGO perspective with the relationship with NL Goodbody, strangely enough, even though occupying the same island, it took going out to Madrid and Warsaw in the PILNet conference to actually get speaking. to ANL Goodbody, but it was the firm that actually followed up upon coming back at the end of the conference, so it does work the other way around as well.
It is a good name for a law firm to have if they want to do public interest law, to be called Goodbody. Fantastic. Helen?
Speaking very honestly, I would say we probably should do it more. I think we've got to a point with our programme where we have so many requests actually in that we find it hard to find the time to look out, and to actually, look beyond what's actually coming into us. And there's quite a good reason for that, which is that actually we do have very long-term relationships with a lot of different NGOs. So, and our strategy has been in place for quite a long time. So, in a way, it's sort of self-fulfilling that the relationships we already have deliver the work that we need to kind of find for our pro bono strategy. But yeah, I think that might be one of the things I take away, that actually we should go out more and do that.
Can I ask a follow-up, which is, so I always get worried when the people who allowed us get served first, right? But you presumably are going to be approached by the more professionalised NGOs, the more established NGOs which already know that large law firms have this on offer, and they have a more or less professionalised staff which is able to approach you and make the request. But do you ever do an evaluation of what actually, if you're interested in human rights or environment or social justice, what are the unmet needs out there, and then go and find NGOs who provide, who may be the quieter NGOs or membership organisations without professional staff? Sorry, we haven't prepped for that question.
I would just say that in that case we're very fortunate to have relationships with a lot of sort of umbrella organisations and sort of leading bodies that represent different either human rights groups or law centre networks, that kind of thing. So we would be in a dialogue with them anyway about the kind of unmet need that they have as a group of NGOs. And we would hear about it that way.
And what I do, I listen to the lawyers in the firm, because sometimes they say, well, I would like to do something for, I don't know, kids or LGBT rights or for women. And I really listen to their ideas, and I'm really trying to find the NGO that will meet that needs. That happens really very often in my company, mostly with junior lawyers. But I'm trying to, because I don't want to say, oh, I don't have, anything in this area. I don't have it now, but I'm really trying to, to get it for them.
And surely there's something about the emergence of point people in the big law firms, the pro bono partners or directors or managers, that those people are in those roles for a reason. And some of those people, I know personally, have come from an NGO, or a public law background themselves. And so I guess would do the outreach or would be connected to different types of networks. Good. Well, one more, yes, and then we're going to move on to the fourth question.
Going back to the comment which was just made, and also on the tips for NGOs and law firms, I think that on the question who should make the first move, a law firm or an NGO, the answer may be use the matchmaker, use the clearinghouse. The clearinghouses, I would really encourage lots of, especially law firms, to use their services, because they save a lot of time that you would have to spend on finding out what is the issue about, or finding out whether or not the given entity meets the criteria of pro bono work altogether. Plus, they actually have an inflow of cases, which, and somebody mentioned that on the audience already, it's not always easy to get as much work as the people are willing to do. And on the final note, as I am into practicalities, as you know from my comment on the weekend in Paris given to the best associate in pro bono in my office, because clearinghouses need to support themselves, I would also encourage all the law firms to contribute a little fee per year so they can actually exist. It's very difficult for them to raise money, and they really do provide a very valuable service to us, to law firms.
Thank you. Right. The fourth question which we set ourselves it relates to that, which is how should charities choose which law firms to approach for pro bono? I think there's a panel on this tomorrow, a whole panel if you're so interested. But from my point of view, as running an international, a very small international NGO, it is quite bewildering the number of law firms that exist, even with the head office in London. And on top of that, I know about the clearinghouses. So if I want to approach law firms directly, how do I know which ones would be suitable for me, given that many law firms say the briefest of things on their pro bono part of their websites? So we're also going to open this out to the audience, but Claire, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
I think speaking to your peer group is a good idea. So, for example, if for example, within the LGBT sector, you might know of other NGOs who have, for example, used a particular law firm, and to find out if they have a particular specialism in that area. I think otherwise, if it's more sort of standard corporate bread and butter work, I think that's maybe a bit less sort of contentious.
And Peter, how do you and your staff choose which lawyers to approach?
Oh, we choose very carefully. I mean, we're perhaps in a privileged position because most of our staff have a legal background themselves, and we work in a specific niche area. So we sort of know the people that work in that field. We know who the good libel lawyers are in this country or in the US. But I mean, we are now going through a process of choosing more pro bono partners in France and in other countries because we need those language skills. And finding out who are the good lawyers there, that takes a lot of field work. And it is actually exactly what you say, Claire. It's going through networks. And not just the networks of NGOs, but for us it's also going through Bloomberg and other internationally operating media to ask them, well, which lawyers do you use in Spain? Who do you use in France? And all of that kind of stuff. And then going out and meeting them and doing the whole matchmaking thing again. It's the interviewing. So there's a lot of research that goes into that.
Yeah, that takes time and resources from your end as well.
It does, yes.
And David, how do you choose the lawyers who you match with the NGOs?
There is a lot of selection and weeding out already done because of the pro bono register that we have. Applying to be on that register tells us that the lawyer is committed to strategic litigation, is committed to the protection of rights and freedoms and equalities. It also tells us the particular specialism that the lawyer has. It also tells us how many years of experience they have practicing, which can also be very important because if it is a particularly complex constitutional matter, there's maybe an advantage there to have a more senior practitioner involved than somebody who's maybe just qualified. So when it comes to we very much have a ready-made pool, if you like. It is a small pool, but we know that those people are very committed to giving their time to the project and to our members. So that's actually a great help in matching need with expertise.
Thank you. Helen?
Well, I was going to say that, really, as a sort of very basic standard, if you're in the UK, you could actually look at the signatories to the Pro Bono Protocol, because that will tell you the law firms that will deliver pro bono with a certain standard of professionalism. But obviously that only helps you if you're UK-based. Beyond that, I would say for a lot of sort of the bread and butter corporate, as Claire called it, many of the big law firms will be able to do that to a good standard. And what you're really looking at then is the kind of people that you like to work with. So it's that extra bit. It's about, well, the approach that one firm might take would be quite conservative. The other might be a little bit more sort of friendly, a bit more relaxed. You can speak to your employees or trustees on your board to say, do you have any knowledge of these law firms? Do you have friends or family who who work for them. You know, it's kind of almost finding a shoe-in somehow, rather than going cold to a law firm, and also to use the brokers who will be able to advise you as well as to the efficacy of certain firms and their areas of work.
Thank you. So that was UK. In Poland, would you say that it's roughly similar, or is it different?
Well, yeah, well, it is. But my advice would be, if you have an occasion to meet in person with the person that actually takes care of pro bono matters, either in your office or in his office, I would do that, because it may appear that there is a good chemistry and good understanding between you two, and that can help you make that decision. That would be my advice.
Okay, great. And what are your ideas? How do you, if you're an NGO, approach law firms? How do you select which law firms to approach? And if you're a law firm, you can barter for clients at this stage. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Svetlana Bizanyan, and I work for the Open Society Justice Initiative, and we engage with pro bono firms quite often. But so this kind of goes back to a comment you made just earlier in terms of the emergence of point people on the firm side. And I think that in an attempt to professionalize how we kind of formalize those relationships with pro bono firms, we're trying to have a point person on our side as well. But up until now, I think it's been a lot more of like an ad hoc situation where people who have those relationships, those personal relationships with people that they know might have a certain kind of expertise with a pro bono with a firm, to whom they'll go directly, and that is a lot harder to keep track of and to kind of to organize that project. So I guess my question is, for law firms, would it be advisable for NGOs to have this more formalized, like point person, model, where that individual or group of individuals would go pretty directly to the firms.
So client care team on the law firm side, matched by a client team on the client side. Good idea?
Definitely. Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
I think,
yes. And Sylvia?
I mean, I think depending on the size of the organisation, I think if the point person has complete visibility over the different sort of say for example there are three teams. If it's got visibility over the sort of work streams that are happening in those say 3 teams, then yes. And I think it becomes harder if it's a big organisation. And I think after that it's probably, well, in my experience, what's worked better is to have within each team, to, for example, there's a weekly team meeting to have, for it to come up in conversation, and for one person in that team, not for that to be their complete responsibility, but they will be the point person within that particular team, rather than one for the whole organisation.
Okay, thank you very much. And in wrapping up, we've got a few minutes. We wanted really to ask you, and I'm going to ask the panelists, if as a result of this session and everything you've heard, or anything you've heard, will you take home something and do something differently, whether you work at a law firm, an NGO, or a clearinghouse? Is there anything that you've heard? Has this been vaguely useful at all? Maybe there's been some kind of light bulb moment for you. Please share.
I was just wondering if you could give us more examples of strategic litigation, anyone in the panel or anyone outside the panel.
Okay, so the light bulb has not yet been turned on for you, right? Right? Fail. Yeah, was there someone over there with a hand up? No, that's it, yeah. And
I'm from Pila, the clearinghouse in Dublin, and I think maybe one thing to take from it would be to encourage the NGOs to expect that professional relationship from the law firms, because only through that professional relationship can you actually get the best advice or opinion for future referrals as well.
Thank you.
Whilst people are thinking, I just wanted to share a little experience and some advice, which is, if you're an NGO approaching a law firm, do your homework. Last year, I was in the previous organisation. My director and I approached a law firm, which may or may not have been Alan Overy. And as we were looking around in some bewilderment in this large city development, we'd come from Budapest, I said to my director, I wonder whereabouts in this building this firm is. And then we sort of stepped back and realised this building was this firm, this massive tower block, and it felt like going into, the Death Star or something. It was so scary. Once we got in there, I have to say that Helen was charming and very welcoming. But really, this can be quite overwhelming. If you're a small NGO, you are dealing with people who, in their bread and butter work, are dealing with global corporations, really, really big clients. So do just kind of get into the right mindset before you go and make these approaches.
The biscuits are very comforting, though.
Are you very nice?
Very high quality, yeah. That's how I would rate law firms, on the quality of the pens, the pads, and the cookies. Right, litigation. Peter, do you want to say a few more words about that? So I think the question was, how can big law firms help NGOs which want to do strategic litigation?
Sure, okay. I mean, we did a case at the European Court of Human Rights a couple of years ago, which is about the protection of journalists' sources, and where the police had behaved very aggressively in acquiring those from the media. And that ended up in Europe, got a really bad judgment at a lower chamber level, and we then teamed up with the lawyers that represented it, brought in lawyers from the US and from Europe, and worked with the lawyers representing the media to make a request for a referral to the Grand Chamber, which they then got and which they argued very well. And then we also teamed up with other NGOs using the same pro bono lawyers to put in an intervention, a third-party brief, which gave the court sort of a wider angle on this case. And all of that was hugely successful. We overturned a 4-3 chamber decision into a unanimous Grand Chamber judgment, where even the judge that had heard the case originally came out and said, I was wrong. I changed my mind. So this is a massive success. I can give you more. I can talk until the cows come home, if you want me to, Oliver, about ways that pro bono can be an essential part in litigation and bring about tremendous change. Do you want me to talk about the cows come home? So there's a House of Law. Okay.
Lawyers, honestly. Okay, couple more comments from lady there and gentleman there. And
hi, so I'm from an organization called iPro Bono that also works to link up organizations with free legal services in terms of administrative support. And I feel like, and I've recently been put in charge of heading up such projects in Bangladesh. Now, I feel like the things that have come up here in the conversations are very relevant when that culture of iPro Bono is already accepted as something that's very good. But I've been facing a lot of problems in where there's an attitudinal problem of both parties being quite suspicious of each other, where the NGOs are like, why would they help us? And the corporate lawyers saying, oh, I'm too busy to do free work. So I'm just wondering, what are the kind of preliminary strategies in getting everybody together to think that this is all a good idea?
And just to add to that, we've approached several law firms for help with litigating against Russia at the European Court of Human Rights. We haven't been successful in finding one single law firm which wants to do that, because many law firms have contracts with the Russian government, and their Moscow office is not really interested. If anyone has any tips. But
Same with China.
Same with China, yeah. See you afterwards. Is anyone going to establish an organisation which is the clearinghouse of clearinghouses? There seem to be so many now. Talking of which, would you like to have one of the last words?
Responding to the question about the take-home messages, one thing that struck me about Helen's Montenegro example was the power of firms to harness their connections and with their partners and with their clients as well, to assist NGOs, and this is really something that certainly from our experience, we're just starting to explore. So yeah, that's definitely something we'll be looking out for a lot more.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask my panelists, what are your take-home messages? Are you going to propose to your organisations to do something differently, or what? There's no order. Please just speak when you think of something interesting to say.
So I'll be using pro bono more for transactional work. I was really pleasantly surprised to hear that a couple of people said that there's a massive appetite for that. So I'm going to satisfy some of that appetite, I think. I also wanted to say, Oliver, that for Russia work, we are actually, okay, it's really hard to get people to work on Russia and on China, but you can get it if you then rebadge it. So you say, no, us is we're the clients. MLDI, we're a London-based organisation, and we won't mention that you've actually done the work. So we're doing a case, we're doing a couple of cases where, we have one that goes so far as the person at a massive law firm that is drafting this for us can only be referred to as Bob, and we can't say even who the firm is, when we interface with it. Anyway, but it can be done.
I think, so going in order, I think mine would be, on a personal level actually, to, as I said, to try and step back and to try and find the time to be less reactive maybe to the requests that are coming in, to actually find the space to go out and do more talking to the people that I have wonderful relationships with around different umbrella bodies and organisations, to hear a bit more about their real needs. I feel like I know it, but I could probably find a lot more. That's mine.
I think for myself, even though it is a pretty small jurisdiction in which we operate, I would like the project maybe to formalise the evaluation of the pro bono contribution a bit more, to really ascertain what both the NGO and the law firm thought about the experience, the process, and to really just formalise the evaluation of it.
I think I would just check with the clearinghouse that is in Warsaw whether it is effective and visible enough to all the NGOs. Because my dream would be to go to these small NGOs, these local passionate people that want to be change makers too. And I'm really curious whether they actually know what is a clearinghouse and they can just go there and ask for help. Because, for example, my last case I took for Clifford Chance came from Facebook page. Someone posted on the Bar Advocacy Chamber that we need help. That was the organization that was taking care of organizing football matches for people after amputation. And they just wrote, can anyone help us? We needed to write an article of statute, actually. And, well, I wrote them back, just come to the meeting, let's talk, maybe we can help you, and we will help them. But whether a clearinghouse is all effective enough, that's what I will check, I guess.
And for me, it would be to carry on deepening the conversations that we have with our NGO partners. And that means trying to develop reflexes on both sides, to start thinking strategically, how can you incorporate and professionalize the use of legal services to strengthen work? And that's, looking into the longer term. And so that might be, for example, I dial into a call once a week or once a month with various organizations, a team meeting to actually hear what they're doing, and sometimes I will suggest, have you thought of this? And it's like, oh no, I haven't, and that, it doesn't necessarily always lead to something, but it, at least it gets the conversation going.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming to this session. If you've spoken, thank you very much for speaking and contributing, and especially thank you to, I thought, a set of really excellent panelists. Thank you.